Are you worried about today's dire financial situation?
Put simply, I would argue the Biden economic plan is working.
The storms on Wall Street continue today after regulators seized the assets of Silicon Valley Bank, marking the largest bank failure since the 2008 financial crisis.
Do you worry you'll have enough to pay your mortgage, pay your children's college tuition, enough to retire?
I believe our banking system remains strong.
Regional banks in focus once again today as the market digests the fallout of the First Republic failure.
You have questions, we have answers. It's the gold standard with Ken Russo and Jennifer Horn.
Yes, it is, and we thank you for joining us for another exciting episode of the Gold Standard Radio Show. Ken Russo, Jennifer Horn, back together again, and it seems like, Ken...
I am on the edge of my seat.
You know what? We all should be, because we just don't know what's happening next. I mean, every time we get together, there's some huge, earth-shattering piece of news that has happened. And here we are, a new presidential
feels
nominee.
That way, Jen.
I know. Now, the presidential nominees may switch it up every once in a while, Ken, but one thing is always for certain. There will always be too much spending from our leaders in Washington, D.C., and that is really what we're here to talk about, the power of gold and silver and how it can protect you. And it's just good to see you. You look all nice and summery today.
I saw something today. I thought of you, Jen.
Tell me.
They said that 60 may be the new 40.
I love it. I love this.
But the $100 bill is the new 20.
Not quite as powerful. That's pretty good. Where did you see that one?
I saw it online somewhere. Yeah, I forget. Where else?
Where else
Yeah.
but on the interwebs? Well, we're going to talk a lot about some of the big news stories this week. There was a big outage that kind of rocked everybody. But first, we should probably put into perspective how we all got started down this mess of spending and, borrowing and spending and paying interest and borrowing some more. And Ken, this all started back in 1971 with the illustrious man, the friend of this program, President Richard Nixon.
Yes, you know it. But, 1913, Jen, the Federal Reserve Bank was formed.
Yep.
And that kind of started, this whole devious plan, this sinister plan of a central banking system, which is kind of, on the verge of collapsing. That's kind of what we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
But in 1971, we became full fiat, where our gold dollar, because for the people listening out there, our dollar used to be backed by a certain amount of gold, so it had value. Mm-hmm. But then slowly but surely, over time, they stripped all the gold out from, our dollar, and that gold dollar became a fiat dollar in 1971, backed by nothing. Just look at your dollar bill. It says Federal Reserve note. Good old Fern. Fern's a constant visitor to the show.
She's here quite a bit.
Yes. But that's what's causing the inflation. Now, what's funny, I've instructed Secretary Connolly to disallow the conversion of the dollar into gold for the benefit, temporarily, right, Jen?
Just
1971. How many years ago was that? 53
50
years,
yeah,
something like
53.
that. So that brings us to today. Mm-hmm. And the thesis of what we're talking about is, are things getting out of control again?
I'd say yes.
Since the great financial crisis in 2008, did we really fix that problem of derivatives? Did we fix that problem of printing money? Have we improved our debt situation as a country or as a world? No. I mean, It's gotten very, very out of control. And let's just talk in simple terms, right, Jen? So what you have right now is a very risky financial system backed by money that's printed out of thin air, money that the Federal Reserve Bank prints, which is a private corporation, so they do what's in the best for their shareholders. They loan that printed money to the United States, so the United States government could print bonds out of just magic, just poof, just out of anywhere. And then the United States pays interest to borrow that money that the Fed printed, when the Fed is not a government organization. It's not federal at all. There's no reserve, and it's not even a bank. So what is this? Is this just a mirage? Is this just an illusion? Is our money just monopoly money? Well, there's a lot of people that think that's exactly what it is. And it's all fine and dandy when your stocks are going up or when you're making a little bit of money on your home, real estate. But do people understand that the inflation rate since about 1971 is about 3,000%? Wow. And they say today, well, we're going to get inflation back down to 2%. That's our goal, right? Well, what happened 2 years ago when it went up 10%? And what happened last year when it went up 5%? And what happened the year before that when, how many percent it went up? So if we get it back down to 2%, we're still in an inflationary period. It's just that the rate of the inflation slowed down a little bit. Well, according to their numbers, and you and I have talked many times about the validity of these numbers are basically, they change them all the time. They revise them.
It's amazing how even numbers can be sort of shaky, right? It's Common Core math is what we call it.
Well, it has to support the narrative.
Yeah.
I mean, what would the narrative be if the government actually came out or the central bank and said, hey, listen, folks, your money is going to continue to dwindle in value and you have absolutely no chance. The middle class is going to get crushed with inflation and with taxes. And quite frankly, this whole monetary system is a big sham. So it's just to the benefit of the Federal Reserve Bank, the central bankers, and basically the political elite who control those sorts of things. What do you think people would do?
I would say panic.
Yeah, they would panic. They would pull their money all out of the bank, well, whatever they can. They wouldn't want to keep all of their assets tied up to a paper digital system. And that brings up something that happened on Friday that was very important.
I thought of you right away because we talk all the time about how having a tangible asset can really help you in times of emergency or disaster. And boy, oh boy, maybe some of you guys saw it. Maybe some of you were impacted by this, but there was a huge global outage. It was a big tech outage, and you had airports that were completely shut down. You had airlines that are still recovering today. Delta's still trying to figure out how to get people their luggage. And you had banks that were impacted. You had media outlets that were impacted. Everybody was touched by this in some way. And Ken, I thought of you because I thought, we're lucky that this time most of the stuff was resolved. But what if this went on for days, weeks, months? What if this was a bigger attack, a more malicious attack?
Yeah, what if it was planned?
What are you going to do? Right.
Yeah, right.
And then all of a sudden you think it would be really nice if I were able to have something out of the system that I could keep at home that's just mine if I need it in case of an emergency.
Yeah, well, that would be the question that I would ask anyone is if we're in a system that is digital, and that's obviously where we're headed.
Sure.
What's the risk of something like this either happening on its own or on purpose? And I would say the risk is very, very high.
Right.
And basically inevitable. It's the dangers of a digital system where you don't have control. So what gives you control? Tangible assets. So gold is a tangible asset. Silver is a tangible asset. Those are two historically, valuable store of metal, pieces of money, monetary pieces, medium of exchanges. There's no third-party counter risk. You could hold it yourself. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about real money versus fake money.
Sure.
So when you have a disruption that affects the banking system or it affects the airline industry, it affects brokerages. They said brokerages were affected. And I have to be honest with you. I mean, I keep most of my money at credit unions. I logged into my accounts on Friday and I said, well, is my money, is it even still there?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of situation. So are we inevitably going to be in a situation where we could be locked out of our money for an extremely long period of time, or something else that could be very, very devious? What if the system is so desperate that we have a reset?
Ugh.
And what if that reset gives us this digital money that we really don't really know even what it's worth?
For the good of the country, right?
Right, for the benefit of the country. Be a good American. Do what you got to do to save the country. But how are you supposed to feel comfortable in that type of a situation where we have no control over our money?
Yeah.
It's my money. It's not supposed to be, you want to use my money to run your system. That's not what this is supposed to be.
Right.
What this is supposed to be is strong, trustworthy money that we could depend on. And unfortunately, the system that we have is not that. And what we are going to talk about in the second half of the show, Jen, is silver. And silver is actually 60% of its price from 1980, if you could believe that, okay? And the best performing asset in the first half of 2024 was silver.
I can't believe it's not outperforming itself even more with all the amount. I mean, silver's in demand right now.
Well,
right?
we're going to go over that. And I mean, Jen, you're a good indicator of a consumer. You're a good indicator of a professional person that's trying to do the right thing. You invest. When that outage happened on Friday, how did it make you feel? What was like the first thing that you felt?
I said, here we go. And the first thing you think is it's intentional, right? That this wasn't just a blip. Now, we know that it was some sort of disruption from Microsoft, and that's great. But what if it had been intentional? And then I start to think this is the most vulnerable that we are as a nation. It is not in a physical war. It's a war that would be escalated through cyber.
A cyber war.
Yeah. And so what are you doing to protect yourself? Because the government is not going to be there to protect you. And so it really made me see the immediate need to think about preparing yourself for this.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And I heard your transition on the radio that day, and that's exactly what it is about. And that's why it's important. And actually, I would say it's just an indication, one indication of how important being prepared for what's coming is.
And it's about diversifying. It's not that everything has to go into one bucket, but you want to have something set aside, intangible assets. And look, we talked in previous shows, and you should find them at MidasGoldGroup.com. You can listen through them. There's different ways to own gold, but having something at home, I think just really in this uncertain time with everything going digital, it's what would make me feel safe.
Yeah, if you bury it in the yard, if you put it in a safe, even if you have to go to a lockbox,
right?
It's better than having no options at all. So my initial reaction on Friday was, obviously, this is inevitably going to happen. What could we do to protect being financially ruined when this does happen, or at least have some purchasing power outside of the system, so in case we ever need it, that's exactly what our gold and our silver is for.
And here's the perfect time to remind you to call Midas Gold Group so that you can go through these options for yourself. Take something that you can hold on to at home just in case of an emergency, of a disaster, like what we saw, just a little piece of it this past weekend. 855-322-4653, 855-322-GOLD, 855-322-GOLD from Midas Gold Group, and check them out always online, MidasGoldGroup.com. That's MidasGoldGroup.com. There's a lot more show left. It's a Gold Standard Radio Show with Ken Russo and Jennifer Horn.
Dr. Gorka here. You're listening to The Gold Standard with your hosts, Ken Russo from veteran-owned Midas Gold Group and Jennifer Horn. Owning private money in the form of physical gold and silver is perhaps more important than ever to your long-term financial security. As U.S. banks fail, the Biden administration sends hundreds of billions abroad while depleting our strategic oil reserves. However, the biggest financial threat may be coming from within: central bank digital currency. The patents have been filed and the big banks have released plans for implementation. Midas Gold Group sees tyrannical implications: the end of cash, the end of financial privacy, big government able to see your every purchase. Could there be ties to social credit? Hear more commentary on the political and economic issues that affect your financial security right here on the Gold Standard. You can create your own Gold Standard with a call to Midas Gold Group, 855-322-GOLD. That's 855-322-4653, MidasGoldGroup.com.
Welcome back. It is the Gold Standard Radio Show. Ken Russo, Jennifer Horn, back together again with all of you. And we always appreciate you joining us. And Ken, you just actually dropped a factoid on me. Mm-hmm. You said, if you make funny faces.
Yeah, I noticed this online, like YouTube or whatever. If you make funny faces and stuff, it seems to get more views.
Huh.
And I was thinking about that, and I could do a couple.
I would like to see
you can do like You know? Like,
Funny faces don't work so much on radio, but you can
that's
almost,
true.
you're almost so
maybe
dramatic.
people will want to tune, or maybe they could what happens is when you make a video,
Yeah.
then you can put like that face on to kind of like tease people to watch it. So,
Right. So you.
One of those. But yeah, I mean, that's what we have to do.
All right, let me have one more really dramatic.
And also, Dr. Gorka just said you can create your own gold standard,
right.
by, owning gold and
So
not
that you can
having
have
all
your
of your
privacy
money.
back.
But you could also create your own silver standard.
Okay, so
So if we wanted to ever do like a sister show, it could be
Yes.
like create your own silver standard.
Now, I feel like, do you like the Brady Bunch when you were growing up?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
I always feel like gold is Marsha Brady and silver is Jan Brady. And I feel like silver's always trying to keep up. But you know what? I root for silver because I feel like it is such a useful metal. It's always in demand. And of course, we don't give financial advice here, but you obviously want your money to hold its value, right? And so if you're looking at something and you go, wow, silver's really in demand and it's priced a little lower than gold, well, maybe that's not a bad idea for me, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the main questions we get all the time is
Marsha?
Well, that too, yeah. I like when Pete's voice changed. Remember that
Yeah, you got like a crack.
episode where it cracked? But silver is a different type of precious metal because there are so many industrial uses, Jen. And I mean, think about this. The price of silver in 2011 reached 50 because we had the financial crisis, right? And I think maybe like in early 2000s, it was probably like $3 or $4, and then it went up to, 50. Back in the 70s, when we had an inflationary period after President Nixon took us off the gold standard, silver also went on a big run due to the Hunt brothers cornering the market, and it also reached a price of 50.
Okay.
So silver twice in its history has been at 50. And when we talk about the price of silver, obviously we're talking about the paper price of silver, the price that you see every day. That supposedly is represented by COMEX, which is the futures exchange.
Sure.
And the COMEX bar, which is 1,000 ounces, is supposed to give a pretty good indicator of the amount of supply versus demand, but it's not. Because even when Joan M. was here a few weeks ago,
One of the listeners of this program.
she mentioned one of the most manipulated fake prices is silver because there could be 500 or 1,000 claims on the same ounce of silver that
crazy
exists.
to me. Right. That actually kind of blew my mind. I never knew about that.
Well, when you think about it, it has to be true because how could so many ounces trade every day and it almost represents the entire years of supply of silver? It doesn't make any sense. So it has to be paper. Now, if you also think about it, what if the people at the central bank don't want people to leave Fern? They want them to stay invested in the Federal Reserve note.
Yep.
Wouldn't it make sense to try and keep the price of gold or keep the price of silver suppressed as much as they can with their buddies down at the Wall Street banks like, Bank of America.
The Wall Street watering hole.
JP Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, Citigroup, the main players.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it make sense? And also, what if these board members of these banks are also people who run corporations? And what if these corporations depend on a reasonable price of silver for, let's say, solar panels, medical equipment, aerospace, military applications? I mean, there's over 10,000 industrial applications for silver. That's only second to crude oil. So if you have such an increased demand for the silver physical product itself, and we're now in the fourth year of a deficit, meaning they're not pulling enough silver out of the ground to meet the demand for these industrial applications. How on earth could the price of silver be still 60% of its value from 1980 or 2011? And I would have to say that it's not its true value. Eventually, the banking system is either going to collapse on its own or under the weight of all of these phony numbers or all of this debt.
Right.
And banks are not going to be able to control the price and suppress the price of gold, or especially silver, the way they have been able to do, they'll have a hard enough time to run their day-to-day operations and just worry about banking.
So what do you ultimately see happen then?
Well, I ultimately see a financial system that's in serious trouble, and I see more people looking for protection and different ways to not participate in that corrupt, fraudulent system.
Right.
And I see them buying and owning more gold and more silver. I also see a lot of the institutions and possibly a lot of the other central banks of the world demanding the physical product, not paper. So if you have a bunch of people that demand the physical product all at the same time, and supposedly there's multiple claims on each individual ounce due to the paper markets, you could see a serious squeeze. And what that means is that the price of silver would have to go up astronomically to a higher price to either convince people to sell some of their silver or to make the market a little bit more.
To get some more back into the market, basically, right?
That's exactly right. So I'm hoping that the supply and demand of silver on its own will someday be able to reflect its true value if these artificial forces are lifted. We are starting to see it a little at a time. And like I said, in 2024, the first half of the year, silver was the best performing major asset of all the markets. It's pulled down a little bit now, and I would tell anybody out there, if they had some money at the bank, or if they had some stock accounts that they were a little bit concerned about, maybe it's a little bit of a bubble, obviously, right now, and we'll see what happens. Or you don't want to have all of your assets tied up to a digital system to kind of protect yourself from a cyber, event like we had recently. Or maybe you might have an IRA that you say to yourself, well, listen, I would really prefer to diversify some of this IRA, or maybe you might have an old 401k. And I would tell you right now that besides looking at and considering gold, silver, based on some of these things that we're talking about, and even the gold to silver ratio, which favors silver right now, because the ratio is like 80, you can get like 80 ounces of silver for every 1 ounce of gold. Right now, the market favors silver on a percentage basis. So for people that are looking for wealth preservation with a tangible asset, I believe that silver should be a main, factor right now. It should be a main, people should be really thinking about it hard. It should be an option at this point for people.
Wealth preservation, a tangible asset. That means something you can hold on to outside of the system. Wealth preservation, it holds on to the value of the money that you're putting in to get it. This is something that checks a lot of boxes. When people come to you in our final couple minutes here, people say, because we always like to kind of go back to just basics here. If somebody says, I have X amount of dollars, you can really take them through whether gold or silver is right for them. Do you have many clients that do both gold and silver, or do you have more clients that pick one or the other, Ken?
Well, I think a lot of clients like to be diversified within their precious metals. So there is a mix of gold and there is a mix of silver. And when we're owning silver, we have to consider how much space it's going to take up, or how much weight it's going to take to move it around, because it could be a little inconvenient. So that's a little different for everyone. So it's a conversation for everybody. I would say the majority of people right now are considering both gold and silver. But when you look at the gold to silver ratio, and when you look at the suppression of price, I mean, gold is up 8 times from 2000 or so. Silver's probably up about 6 times. So if gold continues to do well just based on numbers, the percentage move in silver should be greater.
All right. Will you show us your I just bought silver face?
Yeah.
What about I just bought gold?
What about Nixon just bought gold?
But I mean, that's kind of where we're at. I mean, and sometimes it's better to have 2 horses in the race, Jen, instead of one. No one really knows. I mean, no one has a crystal ball. Anybody who say they do, it's just it's a mug's game to make predictions. But I would just tell you that right now, based on the market, based on how things are acting, based on its history, based on the industrial applications, based on the suppression and the corruption that exists within the suppression of the silver price, right now silver should be an option for everybody listening.
And
today.
you can talk through your options on owning silver and gold, of course. Midas Gold Group is the place to go. Midas Gold Group MidasGoldGroup.com. You can get all sorts of resources and product catalogs there. MidasGoldGroup.com. You can also call anytime 855-322-GOLD. 855-322-4653. 855-322-GOLD. Always MidasGoldGroup.com. Ken Russo, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us on the Gold Standard Radio Show.